The murder of a sex worker leads Crockett and Tubbs to a dangerous arms dealer on today's Miami Vice. Baseballs of Death was written by Peter Lance and directed by Bill Duke, who's primarily known as an actor. He played Agent Odell on the CW's Black Lightning. Despite that title, which sounds ridiculous but actually makes perfect sense in context, this is a pretty grim and dark episode. While the crossover dance hit Pump Up the Volume by Mars plays, a sex worker named Cinder picks up a John driving a Maserati. Cinder is played by model Lisa Marie, who's possibly best known for appearing in films directed by her former longtime partner, Tim Burton. From a nearby hotel room, a dissolute former DMV employee named Shane Dubois secretly photographs Cinder getting into the man's car. He then uses his computer to search Florida DMV records, which show that the car is a rental, currently rented by one Ernesto Guerrero. Shane, who is working in cahoots with Cinder, calls Ernesto and asks for $5,000 in exchange for the incriminating photos. Shane, by the way, is played by actor and musician Michael DeBar, who we have seen before in Season 2's Whatever Works, in which he played himself as the lead singer of the 1980s supergroup The Power Station. To the best of my knowledge, DeBar is the only Miami Vice guest star to appear as both himself and as a separate character, but the series has had so many high-profile guest stars over the years that I could very well be overlooking someone. Ernesto Guerrero, who is played by Ugly Betty's Tony Plana, who we have seen back in Season 1's Give a Little, Take a Little, meets with Shane and Cinder in an alley. He burns the negatives of the film, and then his driver shoots and kills Shane, and he kills Cinder. While investigating the killings, Crockett, Tubbs, and Gina search Shane and Cinder's hotel room and uncover Shane's blackmail scheme. Meanwhile, Ernesto, who is a high-ranking police chief from Chile, who's been working with the DEA in Miami, gives a speech to some DEA agents, including his handler, Brody. Brody is played by Mark Metcalf, who you may know as Niedermeyer in Animal House, or as the Master on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, or possibly for his iconic appearances in a couple of Twisted Sister videos. In an ideal world, you know him from all the above. After the meeting ends, Brody secretly tells Ernesto that he's set up an important meeting at a nightclub. There's an interesting thing going on in this scene in which Ernesto keeps staring at his interpreter, who is a very attractive woman. He's clearly fixated on her in a deeply unsettling way, and I kept waiting for something awful to happen to her. It's actually a bit of a surprise that her body doesn't get discovered at some point in this episode. This episode is pretty dark and hard-edged as is, but there are moments where it seems like something even darker could be happening just off screen. Another example of this comes in the very next scene, in which Ernesto, accompanied by his driver, heads to the nightclub to meet with his contact. At the club, a woman passes him a card with the address of a warehouse on it, while 20 Killer Hurts by Gene Loves Jezebel plays. While he's at the nightclub, though, Ernesto has his driver deliver a bottle of Perrier Jouet to a beautiful blonde woman and offer her $5,000 to sleep with Ernesto. The woman is offended and storms off. Once again, nothing further happens with her, but like the scene with the interpreter, it's deeply unsettling. Both scenes are filmed to make Ernesto seem deeply creepy, and without the episode ever spelling it out for us, and without us ever seeing proof of it anywhere in the episode, it's clear we are meant to think that Ernesto is a dangerous sexual predator. At the warehouse, Ernesto meets with a nebbish bow-tie-wearing arms dealer named Speed Styles, which is a fabulous name, and he's played by Oliver Platt, star of films like Flatliners and TV shows like Chicago Med. Ernesto makes a deal to buy a great deal of weapons from Styles, and he pushes to have him include something called baseballs in his order. Vice tracks Ernesto down through Shane's blackmail photos, and Crockett and Tubbs tail him to the Chilean consulate. They try to arrest him for the murders of Cinder and Shane, but Brody intervenes because Ernesto is a DEA asset. Ernesto lives at the consulate, so Vice can't wiretap his phones, but Switek gets the surprisingly helpful idea to simply listen in on any phone calls that Ernesto makes from his car phone. In early mobile phone technologies, conversations could sometimes be intercepted over radio frequencies. Vice trails Ernesto and eavesdrops on a fragment of conversation involving the purchase of CBUs, which Crockett immediately identifies from his service in Vietnam as a canisterized bomb unit, sometimes known as a baseball of death, but more commonly known as a cluster bomb. While I Can't Break Away by Big Pig plays, Styles swipes some baseballs of death from a military arsenal and sells them to Ernesto, who promptly shoots and kills him. Vice hauls Brody into headquarters, having discovered that he was paid to broker the deal between Styles and Ernesto, and Brody confesses that Ernesto is ready to fly back to Chile with the baseballs of death. Vice stakes out the airstrip where Ernesto's seaplane is about to take off. Ernesto gets spooked by the police presence and takes a hostage and forces the pilot to take off over the water. Thanks to a tip-off from Vice, the seaplane has very little fuel and it lands in the water shortly after takeoff. Ernesto hijacks a fishing boat and gets into a boat chase with Crockett, set to Running on the Rocks by Shriekback, which ends very dramatically when Ernesto's boat jumps over a tugboat, crashes into land, and explodes. Ernesto is a deeply chilling character, and Tony Plana brings a great deal of menace to his performance through small, subtle movements and gestures. Thanks to Ernesto, Miami seems like a very dangerous place. Stiles and Brody are both well-developed characters too, well played by Oliver Platt and Mark Metcalf, and the script does a nice job of generating a true sense of urgency surrounding Vice's mission to stop Ernesto from releasing the baseballs of death into the world. 4 flamingos for this one. In the next episode, Tubbs goes undercover on a reservation to track a squadron of crossbow-wielding Native American vigilantes. Join me then, and please subscribe to my channel or chat with me on Twitter, and I'll see you here later.